Okay, so you guys should all have a piece of paper. That is, again, I'm just gonna say it again, is about 29 inches long, something like that. I can tell you that my sleeve is about 24 inches long. So it probably at the most maybe needs to be 26, 27. There's no way someone has a longer sleeve than 27 inches, which is 70 centimeters. Okay. Width, actually, even 11 inches works for the width. So if you guys are using sort of 8.5 by 11, or even a, what is it? The standard letter size paper. If you just want to connect 3 pieces, I think that should be good enough, or 4 pieces. I want to show you guys the sleeve that we're going to be drafting today before we begin, so that you know what the end is going to look like. We've got our upper sleeve, okay, which is the one that has the sleeve cap, and our under sleeve, which goes around the base of the arm. And these are forced forearm sleeves, which means that the upper sleeve is bigger than the under sleeve, which means that the upper sleeve wraps around the arm. Okay. When it curves and connects, it actually wraps around. Okay. What does that mean? I just want to let you know, because not all of you guys are taking our making course. What that means is that when you make this sleeve, you need to stretch this area right here so that it becomes straight. Okay. This curve that you see right here needs to actually curve in the opposite direction. Okay. It needs to match this curve. It needs to curve in the opposite direction. That also means that when we draft this, when you put them together, the undersleeve is going to be slightly longer than the upper sleeve along the forearm seam. Okay. So these are just notes that you need to know. This is already going to automatically happen in your draft. I just want you to be aware that when you put this sleeve together, you do need to stretch the forearm seam of the upper sleeve, okay, in order to make it fit again, so that it wraps around the body, around the arm, and this seam needs to be straight. What's going to happen is if you don't stretch that seam, you're going to get puckering on the outside, okay? It's going to look tight on the outside. It's kind of like when you don't stretch out a curve at your waist, okay? And it's something that I think not everyone is used to doing. And so we're all used to seeing, oh, the seam is sort of tight just because I have a lot of seam allowance. Just stretch it, okay? That's the best way to go. That way you don't have to, that will just make, it'll make your sleeve 100 times more professional, okay? That's the sleeve. I want to go over some key points, okay, before we begin. This is your front pattern or something like it. Some of you guys might have a princess seam, which means that you actually need to put 2 front pieces together to get the front. I have my side, my front, my side, under my back. Okay, that's my armhole right there. Okay.
If you're drafting for a shirt, then you'll probably just have a front and a back piece. So CB is using a jacket pattern, and it has a front, a side, and a back.
Exactly.
Or you're drafting for a dress, in which case you may have a princess seam, and then you might have 4 pattern pieces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me know if you guys have any questions throughout that are specific to your pattern. Do not hesitate. You can raise your hand in the Zoom, or you can also write in the chat, and then we'll have you unmute yourself if you have to explain yourself, okay? And we'll keep an eye on that throughout the workshop. So there are some key points that we need to talk about. We have a back pitch, okay? A back pitch is a notch at the back of your armhole. We have a front pitch, which is a notch at the front of your armhole, okay? Both of these are sort of wherever you want them to be, okay? But the front pitch, at least in this jacket drafting method, is 2 inches above the chest line. And the chest line is this line that runs through the body of the garment, right through the armhole. Okay. This is the chest line. And it's used in the drafting of this jacket, but you can also just add a chest line to any pattern, okay? It's important that it goes through the base of the armhole, okay? In this case, I put it at the edge of the paper, not at the seam allowance, okay? I recommend that you guys all do that so that we're all on the same page. It can technically also go through the seam allowance, but just so that we are all on the same page, let's put it at the edge of the paper, which means that you've got whatever your seam allowance is. In this case, it's a centimeter. You have a centimeter seam allowance above your actual stitch line, okay? The only important thing is that when it comes to seam allowances is that at some point we're going to measure the armhole, and you have to measure the true armhole. So you're going to measure it without any seam allowances on the stitch line, okay? So it's very important that you know what your seam allowances are on your pattern, okay? So if you guys don't have a chest line, put your chest line in right now. I recommend lining up your pattern pieces as I've done so that you can just take some measurements before we get started, okay? On the sleeve also has a chest line, which is going to be one of the first lines that we place down. On the sleeve, this chest line, which also goes through the base of the armhole, as you can see, right? This is the undersleeve, and this is the base of the armhole. It also goes through the base of the armhole. It's exactly in the same place as it is on the jacket, okay? On the sleeve, we call it the balance line because obviously there's no chest on our sleeve, okay? But when I say balance line or chest line on the sleeve, it's the same thing, okay? So the balance line of the sleeve is the chest line of the jacket. So one thing we need to do, so we need to measure up from our chest line to our front pitch. Okay, that's the first measurement we need. If you do not have a front pitch, we are going to place it right now all together as 2 centimeters above the chest line. Okay, so measure from the chest line 2 inches up,
Two
sorry, 2
centimeters.
centimeters, 2 centimeters up. Draw a horizontal line, as in it's parallel to your chest line. That is what I call A. And I'm gonna write it right here. A is my front pitch, and it is 2 centimeters above my chest line, okay? My back pitch is also something that I place on my jacket, okay? The sleeve that we're making is going to be gathered from roughly here to here. What is this? This is basically, it's essentially about 2¼ inches, something between 2.5, 2¼ could be 2.5 in the front, and about 2.5 inches in the back, in the front and in the back. Okay. For about 2, and it depends on, obviously it depends on how big your armhole is. So between 2 and 3, okay, this one's pretty standard, so I'm gonna go with 2.5, is roughly where the sleeve cap will be gathered on the top half, okay? Which means that your back pitch is sort of designating where that begins on the back of your sleeve, okay? You don't need to go crazy when you place this. Some people place it halfway between the shoulder point and this notch right here, which is where the side body connects to the back. But again, this notch can be anywhere depending on the design of your jacket. So, and you might not even have that notch. So I think it's probably easier and more accurate to just measure down approximately 2.5 inches.
And the back pitch is where the back, the hind arm seam, because the hind arm seam of this sleeve, that's where that hind arm seam on the sleeve meets the armhole of the jacket or the shirt.
Yes.
So
you'll see as we draft that is this point right here. Okay, so that's where this seam, which is the hind arm seam, meets the armhole seam. Okay,
Yeah.
that is your back pitch.
Okay, just a quick question. The 2 centimeters put my front pitch on still on my side panel. Is that okay?
Yeah, if you have a princess seam, it would be on your side panel. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so we've set our back pitch, we've set it. Now measure up again from your chest line to your back pitch. And I'm gonna do this in centimeters, and it's 12, for me, 12 centimeters. Okay. The next thing we need to do is we need to measure our armhole, okay? So you're gonna do this, like I said, it's the true measurement of the armhole. It's from seam to seam on the stitch line of the armhole, okay? So I have 1 centimeter seam allowances on all of my seams, and my stitch line is 1 centimeter in from the arm, from the edge of the pattern, okay? So I'm gonna measure. And make sure that you do not come in more than 1 centimeter, okay? Don't, it's easy to make it If you need to draw a line, draw the line, okay? Because if you come in even 1/8 of an inch more, your armhole is gonna be significantly bigger. So I'm at 50 centimeters. I'm gonna do measures. $50 centimeters. You guys can measure twice if you want.
And if your pattern has 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, measure that distance with your seam allowance that's on the pattern, whatever the seam allowance is.
Don't use a centimeter if your pattern has 5/8 of an inch seam allowances.
Yeah.
So I'm skipping over, I've got a seam allowance here as well, okay? Now I'm measuring 51, which is probably a little bit more accurate, to be honest.
This is probably the hardest part of this whole process is
Yeah,
getting this measurement. So take your time.
also just keep in mind that if you're drafting for a jacket, your armhole will probably stretch out. So you might want to err on the bigger number. Now I'm getting 50. One more time. I might have started not from the right place the first time. Yep, 50 it is, 50, okay? That's what my this is what my measured, my armhole seam measures to, okay? If you are making a jacket, okay, so not a dress, not a shirt, okay? You need to take away some ease. I'm gonna say this for specifically for the people who are in our making workshop, okay? Because if you're not in our making workshop, you might not be making a jacket. If you don't use bespoke making methods, then this might not apply to you. You don't want your armhole to be too small for your sleeve, okay? So if you are in our making workshop, we are going to be shrinking this area right here during the making process, okay? And we're also going to be shrinking this area right here. The total amount that we're going to be shrinking is about 1.5 centimeters, okay? So you have to take away 1.5 centimeters from this amount. And that's going to be your finished armhole, okay? So finished. If you're not in our making workshop, then you don't have to do this unless you know that when you make your jacket, you have to shrink here and you have to shrink here, okay? If you know that, you can take this away. If you don't know it, don't worry about it. Because what happens is that you shrink here to create shape for the shoulder blade, okay? There are patterns where there's darts at the shoulder seam and you don't have to create that shape by shrinking, okay? So if you, again, if you're not in our making workshop, you probably want to skip this step right here, in which case the measured amount is going to be your finished armhole amount, okay?
And would you also say that if someone's making a shirt or a dress?
Yes, that would also be your finished armhole. Yes. So what I measured would be your finished armhole measurement, unless you are making a jacket with us in our workshops. And even then, this is a question that I have because some cloth really stretches out. And so you actually shrinking in actually sometimes gets you to the original armhole, not with the ease taken out, okay? But again, during the making process, that's something that we figure out along the way. So I'm gonna take away 1.5 is minus 1.5 centimeters, or 5/8 of an inch if you are working in inches. So that's gonna be 48.5 centimeters, okay? This is my finished armhole. We're gonna use that number a lot, okay? We're also gonna use that number to check to make sure that our sleeve is going to fit into this jacket. The last thing we need is called the crown height, okay? The crown height is basically how tall is our sleeve cap, okay? And different tailors measure it from different places. I am going to measure it from the chest line, okay? So from the chest line, you're going to measure to the top, to your armhole point on the back, including seam allowances, okay? Because we're including seam allowance under here, so we're gonna include seam allowance at the top of the shoulder seam as well, okay? If your chest line is going through the stitch line, not including the seam allowance, you have to go stitch line to stitch line. But I hope that everyone put their chest line at the edge of their paper, going through the edge of the paper at the base of the armhole, okay? Which means we are including the seam allowance. So when we measure up, we need to include the seam allowance also at the along the shoulder seam, okay? So I'm measuring on the back 19.5. On the front, 20.5. 18.5, 20.5, which added together is 40, and divided by 2 to get the average is 20 centimeters, okay? Again, I'm going to measure from the chest line to the shoulder point, including seam allowances, on the back and on the front. And I'm going to take the average of those two, which means you add them together and then you divide them by 2, okay? So I know this is a little bit of math, but it's also very sort of conceptual, okay? We're just measuring up, because if our shoulder point was in exactly the same spot, we would just have to measure up from the chest line, okay? But our front and our back might be, shoulder points might be at different spots, okay? Might be at different distances from the chest line. So again, my back is measuring at 19.5. I'm going to take that 19.5, place it at my shoulder point, measure down to the chest line 40, divide by 2, I get 20. 20 centimeters is my crown height. 20 centimeters.
I just want to point out that even though she measured with seam allowance at the shoulder seam, she did come in a centimeter, which is her seam allowance at the the front and the back side. So do you all see that?
Do you see that I'm measuring to this point? Okay. I'm coming in the seam allowance. I just want the most accurate measurement. Okay, that's really what it's about. So I don't want the slope to get in the way. So I just want the most accurate measurement. Okay. So we've got our front pitch, our back pitch, our finished armhole measurement, and our crown height. Okay? We are now going to start drafting, and we're going to do a little bit of math as well along the way, but we're going to start drafting first. You can move away your pattern for now. We're going to use it again in a minute. Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please do.
I'm having some difficulties with the back pitch.
Okay. Are you not sure where to put it?
Yes, I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Are you drafting a sleeve for a jacket?
Yes, for a jacket.
Okay. I would say I kind of want to see your pattern. Is there any way you can hold it up for me?
Sure.
Yeah, or show us. Perfect. Okay. That's your front. That's your back.
And I took 2.5 centimeters here.
2.5 inches. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
2.5 inches down.
Okay. And then you take a straight line like this.
Yes.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good question. Sorry. I switch between inches and centimeters. And sometimes I slip and I accidentally say one over the other, but if I do, please correct me because that's important, obviously. So about 2.5 inches down on either side of the shoulder seam, okay, is where you're going to gather your sleeve cap. Okay. The first thing we need to do is draw a line, which is going to be our hind arm construction line. Okay, so if this is where we're going to draft our sleeve, imagine, okay, we want our construction line to be roughly roughly 11 inches away from this edge, okay? 11 inches up, draw a line, okay? 11 inches, you can also do 12 inches. If you connected a bunch of papers though, 11 inches is about as far as you can go. You're not gonna have a sleeve that's wider than 11 inches, so. I'm going to do 11 inches. Okay, that's your. From this line, we are going to draw our chest line, which is roughly 2/3 in from the left side, 1/3 in from the right side. Okay, that's roughly where your chest line is. Just so that you have enough space to draft. And you can really eyeball it. That's about 1/3, okay? You do want it to come out perpendicular from that first line that you drew. So if you have a right angle or an L square or a T square, use that, okay, just to get this line, make sure that it's come straight down. Okay. This is the right angle. This is our chest line, okay? So now we need to place our A line and our B line, our front pitch line and our back pitch line, okay? From this line, we measure 2 centimeters up for the front pitch line, right? 2 centimeters. And 12 centimeters or whatever your measurement was up for the back pitch. If you don't have a pattern, it should be 12 centimeters. If you do have a pattern, it should be whatever your measurement was up from the chest line. I'm going to again show you. On the back panel, this is the back panel. This is my back pitch right here. And I measured up from the chest line up to my back pitch. I measured 12 centimeters. That same 12 centimeters gets transferred over here. Okay, 12 centimeters. Draw perpendicular lines coming out of both of those points. Okay, so they're going to be parallel to the chest line. Coming straight down. Coming straight down. The third line that we need is our crown height line. I'm gonna extend this. And we're gonna do our crown height is 20 inches, 20 centimeters above the chest line. So I'm gonna mark 20 centimeters. Bring that line down as well. This can be a line, it doesn't necessarily need to be a line, but we're gonna make it a line. It can also just be a point. So we've got A line, we've got B line, we've got crown height line, which is my little symbol for as like a crown, a king's crown. And this is our balance line, our chest line, okay? I'm going to give you guys a formula now, okay? Which is, it's very important, and it's the width, it's basically the width of the bicep, okay? But I'm going to show you how we're going to use it. The formula is the finished armhole measurement, okay? The finished one, divided by 2 minus 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so it's the finished armhole divided by 2 minus 1.5 centimeters. Okay, which means 48.5. I'm gonna have to do this on my computer because I just don't want to. Whenever there's measurements like this, you don't want to do it in your head, even if you're really good at mental math, because you just don't want to mess it up. 48.5. You guys are all going to have different measurements here, but if you're using my measurements, I'm doing 48.5 divided by 2, and then I'm subtracting 1.5 centimeters, okay? I'm working all in centimeters. I'm gonna get 22.75. 22.75 centimeters, okay? This number,
If you're working in inches, please subtract 5/8 of an inch and not 1.5.
honestly, there's a reason why we work in centimeters when it comes to drafting. It's easier to subtract. It's easier to do math on a calculator when you're working in centimeters. It's much harder to do math on a calculator when you're working in inches, okay? We use a lot more fractions in inches and less decimals, okay? 22.5 centimeters is the distance from this point right here, B, where B meets the back construction line, to A, where A meets the front construction line, okay? So we're measuring from the B line to the A line across the sleeve. Okay, so it's not really the bicep because that would be straight across, okay? It's actually from B to A, and so mine is 22.75, which means I'm gonna mark 22.75 right here. Okay. And now I'm gonna draw my front construction line. Okay. And it doesn't need to go all the way down, but it needs to cross all the top section, the entire top section. All these 4 lines it needs to cross. Okay. If your armhole is the right size for your body, this should give you the correct width, bicep width, okay? If your armhole is a little bit too small, that will create a small bicep in your sleeve, okay? So this is part of the sort of bespoke tailoring mentality, which is that the sleeve gets drafted after the armhole is set and we know the armhole works, okay? So sometimes you might want to have a couple fittings without a sleeve in, and then you want to draft the sleeve when you know the sleeve's the right size. Otherwise, just get comfortable with this drafting method. You're going to draft the sleeve over and over and over again, okay? Which is also could be perfectly fine, okay? I'm going to show you guys at the end how you can make the bicep wider if you need the bicep to be wider, okay? But for now, this is the way that we're going to measure the width, create the width of our bicep, okay? Okay, we've got our construction line: front, back, crown height, back pitch, front pitch, chest line, okay? We're now going to start shaping. The first thing we want to do is the halfway point between, I'll use this as longer, along the back pitch line. You're going to mark the halfway point. I'm not going to say numbers anymore because everyone's pattern is different, okay? So I'm going to mark the halfway point. And then I'm going to move that point 5 millimeters or half a centimeter or a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch towards the back of the sleeve. Okay, this is the back of the sleeve. This is the front of the sleeve. I'm going to push it towards the back of the sleeve. This is going to give us the top of the sleeve cap, which is a little bit towards the back of the sleeve. okay? So from that center point, I'm gonna go back a 1/2 centimeter. I know it seems insignificant, but it's very significant. And I'm going to draw a line up. This is the top of our sleeve, okay? On the back side, we're gonna put a construction line that connects that point, the top of the sleeve cap, to the back pitch point, okay? It's a construction line, so you can make it light. On the front side, we are going to, with your ruler, not with your pen, with your ruler, you're gonna connect that top of your sleeve cap to where your front pitch is on the front side of the sleeve. Okay, your front pitch line crosses the front construction line. Place your ruler there. Don't draw a line. You're going to mark with your pencil where that line crosses the back pitch line. Yes? And then you're going to move 3 centimeters forward. Three centimeters forward. That point, you're going to connect with a construction line to the top of your sleeve cap. And you're also going to connect it to your front pitch. Okay. These are our construction lines for our sleeve cap. How are we doing? Is everyone caught up? Are we all at the same spot? Okay. Please write in the chat if you need me to slow down or if you need me to clarify something or re-explain exactly how I got these points, because obviously we're talking 1/2 centimeters, we're talking 3 centimeters, where exactly is totally fine if you need me to repeat, okay? Okay. Now from here, we need to draw the actual sleeve cap, okay? And I'm gonna give you guys some tips for how to do that in the best way possible, okay?
CV, I think,
Yes.
can you just go really quickly how you got this, the front
Yes,
side, just
yes. I'm gonna
really
re-explain this, okay? I connected with my ruler the top of the sleeve cap to the front pitch. I'm calling this point now the front pitch, and this point is the back pitch, okay? The front pitch to the top of my sleeve cap connected with a straight edge. I'm going to mark where that straight edge crosses the back pitch line, okay? Take away your ruler. Now you need to measure from that notch, that mark that you made, 3 centimeters forwards, okay?
towards you.
Towards me. This is the front of the sleeve, this is the back of the sleeve. So towards the front of the sleeve. Okay, 3 centimeters towards the front of the sleeve. Also intuitively, if you're ever like, oh, I can't remember, is it forwards or backwards? If you were to put it backwards, what would that sleeve cap look like? Obviously, it wouldn't work. Okay, so
And you'll see why in a second.
you will answer your own question, okay, your own doubt towards the front. Then I'm going to connect that point with construction lines to the top of the sleeve cap and to the front pitch. Okay. We are going to now basically connect the dots with a curve, which is going to be our sleeve cap curve. In order to get, so once you really know what a sleeve cap looks like, you can literally just eyeball this from this point, okay? But I'm going to give you tips now so that you can really find the best curve. You learn from the very beginning how the curve needs to be, okay? So these are tips, they're not rules. From halfway through this line, this construction line right here, okay? About halfway. Our curve is going to come out like this, and you don't want it to be more than a centimeter away from the construction line. So I like to put a little centimeter notch, okay? That comes out right at the middle of that line, okay? Now you can connect it by eyeballing, or you can connect it with a hip curve. A hip curve, okay? But what you want to do, what I want you to imagine is that if there was a mirror line right here, the curve on this side and the curve on this side would be the same. Does that make sense? So we're making a perfect curve going from this point to this point, going through that little 1 centimeter away from the line notch, okay? And we're not making it go really big here and really small there, right? We are making it, we are also not making it go, just gonna give you some exaggerations of how we're not doing it. We're not making it go really small here, going through here, and then a big bulge right here, okay? Do you guys see how that's not mirrored on this line? If you want sort of a more mathematical or geometrical tip, this angle and this angle need to be the same. Okay, that's sort of the mathematical way of explaining this. I'm going to say that again. When I draw this, call my construction line. When I draw this here, and I come in here, like so. And again, make it beautiful, okay? This angle right here and this angle right here are the same. Do we see that? They are the same angle. From this point, okay, you want roughly, what is this? I just usually eyeball this, so I think it's about 2.5 to 3 centimeters of flat across the top. Okay, so roughly, let's say I'm doing about 3. I think that if you were making a larger size jacket, then if you were making a child size jacket, you'd probably do 2.5. If you're doing a men's jacket or larger, on the larger side, 3.5. 3 is pretty good. I usually just eyeball it. It's somewhere around here. Flat, okay? Then again, these are all tips, right? Because someone who knows what this is supposed to look like would just draw it. okay? So coming out from this line in the same way that we did on the front, approximately, I think 2.5. 2.5 again, 2.5 to 3. Let me eyeball it. We're using the same idea though on this side, okay? So you also want to have sort of a mirror line. And you're going to want the same angle on one side as the other, okay? Except for this time, the angle is way bigger. Yeah, that looks good. You should now be able to see why I say roughly 2, 2.5. 2.5, sorry, 2.5, 3. Because technically it's closer to 2.5, where it actually leaves that line. Okay. On this side, this we're going to keep a straight line. And the reason is because this is basically on bias, which means we don't need to put any curve into it. Okay. I know it sounds strange, but we just don't need to put any curve into this. Straight line easily becomes a curve when it's on the bias. Basically, any straight line is a curve on the bias. Comes to here. I actually want this to be a little bit bigger here. If your sleeve cap is not super smooth, like mine is not super smooth, you can make it smoother. I'm going to come out just a little bit more here, about 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Try to make it more smooth. Again, this is not a science, but I'm trying to give you guys the best tips I can to explain where to put, how to draw this curve. Okay. There we go. That looks better. Okay. Okay. From here, we have our sleeve cap drawn. Okay, now we have to start working on the other half of the sleeve. This sleeve is going to be at an angle. The sleeve that we're making comes down at an angle. Okay, so it's curved at the elbow. Okay, so we need to get that angle. The average angle, and again, this can change depending on the person's arm, but the average angle is, if you take the halfway point here, okay, remember this was 2 centimeters, so now we've got a 1 centimeter mark, and you connect that line to your front pitch, that point to your front pitch. You can draw a line if you want. If you have a right angle or an L square or a T square, put your 90° at your front pitch, and you're going to draw this line down here. If you don't, you're gonna draw that line, and then you're gonna come in and you're gonna make a perpendicular line coming down like this. Okay. And you're gonna make that line as long as you possibly can on your paper. So again, I'm taking halfway between the chest line and the front pitch line on the back construction line. And I'm gonna connect that point, that halfway point, to my front pitch. That's gonna give me a slanted line, okay? From the front pitch, I need to get a right angle line that comes down, and you can do that with your ruler. That comes down the front of the sleeve. And this is why you didn't need to bring that construction line, that first construction line, all the way down, okay? Because it actually needs to be tilted, slanted. Okay. From here, we need to take a look at our forced forearm seam, okay? So we are going to force our forearm seam on the chest line. I want you to mark 2 centimeters out from that original point. It's basically the same thing. Doesn't matter which construction line you use. 2 centimeters out and 2 centimeters. We're going to start with 2 centimeters in. Okay. Two centimeters out, 2 centimeters in. This point can shift slightly, but this is for the underarm sleeve, so we're not going to worry about it right now. We are going to now, we're gonna save these 2 points to connect in a minute, because I want to get the length of the sleeve, the elbow line, okay, so that we can get this forearm seam and hind arm seam, okay. There's a measurement that you're going to need, which is the length of your sleeve, okay. The best way for me there's 2 ways of measuring the length of your sleeve. My preference is to measure from the top of your sleeve cap to your hem, okay? But you can also measure it from your the nape of your neck, okay? Which is sort of more conventionally a measurement that is taken in men's tailoring, okay? Usually, especially in shirt making, the sleeve length of a shirt is measured from the nape of the neck to the cuff of the sleeve, okay? If you go shirt shopping, that's the number. The number is from the nape of the neck to the cuff of your sleeve, okay? Which you can use, but it's just easier for me to explain the drafting of the sleeve if you just measure from the top to the hem of your sleeve. How do you do that? If you are measuring for a jacket, okay, you need to include the shoulder pad. And the shoulder pad is, let's say, roughly a centimeter, which basically just means you need to pinch the top of your measuring tape. That is your shoulder pad, okay? So if you pinch the top of your measuring tape and then set it on top of your shoulder, that's going to automatically include your shoulder pad, okay? If you don't have a shoulder pad, if you're making for a dress or a jacket or a shirt, you don't need to pinch, you just start measuring from the height of your shoulder point, okay? The height of your shoulder point. Straight down. Of course, if you're measuring on someone else, this is significantly easier. I'm going to put my shoulder pad in here. If you're measuring on yourself, I like to hold my measuring tape like this with my hand, create some tension so that I can then release the top and measure from the bottom, okay? If you guys are using my measurements, I'm going to give you 22 inches, which is 56 centimeters. Okay, 56 centimeters. 56 centimeters sleeve length. Okay. You are going to measure, you're going to use that measurement, but you're going to start measuring 1 inch down from the top of your sleeve cap, okay? So let's just do roughly 1 inch. And then you're going to measure down, straight down, 56. Okay. Significantly easier than having to, if your measurement is from the back nape, you need to take away a certain amount. You need to basically take away the cross back, okay, which you need to figure out what that is. Okay, so again, that measurement, make sure that you don't measure it from the top of the sleeve cap, you measure it from 1 inch below the top of the sleeve cap down 22 inches or 56 centimeters or whatever you have measured on yourself. Okay. This angle, okay, is going to change. So what I want you to do is roughly place an angle here. It should be slightly more than this angle up here, okay? So if we were going straight across, it would be like this. If we were at this same angle, we would be slanting this by a centimeter. Slant it a little bit more, okay? It's not going to be too much. Again, we're going to set this angle later on, but it needs to go through the sleeve length mark that you made, okay? Which means on the front side, it's going to be slightly shorter, and on the back side, it's going to be slightly longer. Draw a line, but it's like basically a construction line, okay? About halfway between the chest line and this hem line, which is right here, okay, is where we're going to put our elbow line. And we want that elbow line to be perpendicular to our slanted front construction line, okay? Again, everyone's elbow is in a different spot. If you had a measurement of where your elbow is, you would use that measurement. But just to make things easy for everyone, we are going to be putting it about halfway between the hem and the chest line. That's roughly where the elbow is, okay? along this elbow line, remember we have a forced forearm. This is the forearm side of the sleeve. So we're going to connect this point. I should just erase this one because this is confusing. That was that old construction line, that first construction line. Okay. We are going to connect that point to this point that we have created here, okay? That 2 centimeters, this point was 2 centimeters away. This point right here is 2 centimeters out. Remember we said 2 centimeters out, 2 centimeters in. It's the 2 centimeters out point that we are connecting to this elbow line. Okay. We are also going to come out 2 centimeters from here. In the same way that we did up here, 2 centimeters out along that construction line. And again, we're going to connect here. Okay. I actually find this to be too much of an angle. You know what? We're not going to do that. There's a couple different ways of drafting the sleeve, and I find that this way just makes the sleeve too curved. Okay, so we're just going to keep it from this point going to the elbow point, going straight down. Okay, we are though going to set in 2 centimeters in. Okay, 2 centimeters in. Here, we've got 4 centimeters in. Four centimeters in here. This is basically our forearm seam for our upper sleeve. I'm going to show you guys right now. That's the construction lines for this edge. Okay, that's what that is. We're going to turn it into a curve. It's basically already curved. Okay, that is that line. We now need to create the same line for the undersleeve. Okay, so you're going to come in 2 centimeters at the hem. At the top, you're coming in 4 centimeters. Remember, we already placed this point. And in the middle, roughly 3. 2.5, 3. I think that 1, 2, 3. 3 is okay for now. Okay. We are now going to do the hind arm seam. Okay.
How's everyone doing with their forearms before we go to the back? Good.
Okay.
All right.
On the back side, So the first thing we need to do is find this point here, okay? The width of our cuff, okay? Honestly, there's different ways that tailors find the width of a cuff. Most tailors just know how wide cuffs need to be, okay, which of course doesn't help us. I can tell you, like some of them have a chart in their head that is basically for this size chest, this is what the cuff measurement needs to be, okay? I can give you right now that formula. It's another formula. I know that we don't really like formulas that much because we're not in math. But the formula is sleeve width. It is roughly an eighth of the chest plus 4 centimeters, okay? So your chest width, just measure it. An eighth of the chest. It should really be on your pattern, but for the purposes of this drafting, 94 is my chest. I am going to do 94 divided by 8 plus 4, 15.75. Okay. Now basically, what is that? 94, 94. That's a 37-inch chest. Okay. So you can imagine that's fairly average, maybe on the smaller side. If you have a 40-inch chest, I said 15.75 centimeters. If you have a 40-inch chest, maybe 16.5. Okay. It's not going to be wider than 17 centimeters. And again, these amounts are half the circumference of your sleeve, okay, of your cuff. So your cuff goes around, but we need the folded measurement. So we need half of it, okay, because that's how we're drafting. We're drafting the folded amount. So 15 3/4, 16, 15, 16, 17, okay? If you're very petite, maybe 14, okay? Because of our forced forearm seam, we need to measure this from halfway between these 2 points, okay? So halfway between those 2 points, I'm going to measure across 15 3/4. Does everyone have that point marked? The width of your cuff. If you don't know what your chest measurement is, or you don't have, you're drafting for someone else and you don't have their chest, you can measure the pattern, okay, the chest line across the pattern. It's going to have some ease in it. But again, if you get 17 is for a large jacket, okay? 17 is for a large jacket. So if you're making for a small person, 17 is probably a little bit too big. Okay, I would say 15, 16 is average, 17 is large, 14 is small. Okay. Once you have that point down, you're going to connect that point to your back pitch with a straight line. And I don't have a ruler long enough, so I'm using my measuring tape. Actually, is this long enough? No, it's not long enough. Connect them with a straight line, back pitch to that point on your cuff, okay? You're going to draw a mark going across the elbow line where this straight line crosses. Just mark it, okay? From that point, you're going to go 3 centimeters out. 3 centimeters out. You're going to connect that to your cuff width. And you're also going to connect that to your chest line. Okay. Now, we need to turn that into a curve. And there's also something else that you can do, because as you guys can see, the width of this bicep is a bit on the small side. Okay. That's this sleeve drafting method. There's other sleeve drafting methods that maybe would give you a bigger bicep. Okay. Specifically for jackets, you try to have as narrow of a sleeve as you possibly can. Okay. But obviously people have biceps and we have to take that into account. So sometimes I will add a centimeter here. Okay. And I will go from the back pitch. I will curve outwards slightly. And then come back in at the elbow. Okay. So I'm going to do 2 hind arm seams. I'm going to curve them now. And when you curve this, you can actually, do you guys notice how pointy this is at the elbow? It's very pointy. We can shave off the point of that elbow point, the elbow curve, okay? Shave it off. That's going to give us a nice curve. Straight below, needs to be straight, especially if you have a button cuff. Must be straight from the elbow down, or roughly 4 to 5 inches above the sleeve hem, which of course we need to set in a second. Coming up, you're going to have one version where you're coming up straight into the original construction line, okay? And the second version, and also it kind of looks like I could actually shave a little bit more off of this. That looks better. Again, you want it to be harmonious. So if it looks too pointy, it is too pointy. Okay, do you guys see how that's better? Our second option here is coming out for the bicep and coming back in at the elbow. You want it to be as straight as possible between the two. Okay. Okay, so that's just going to give us a little bit extra. I'm gonna do this one in pink. Okay. That pink is, what if you need more than an extra centimeter in the bicep added? This point can come out slightly, okay? But then you have to realize that you're adding length to your sleeve cap. So you need to take away some length from your sleeve cap by raising this point up, okay? So what you're gonna want to do is, if you need more width, you shouldn't need too much more width, because remember, as I explained before, if your armhole fits and your sleeve fits your armhole, you should be pretty close. But let's say that you need to add a centimeter, sorry, a half an inch here, okay? Add a half an inch. How are we on time? How much time do we have? We're almost done drafting.
We have half an hour.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to go into this for a moment before we finish drafting the sleeve. So I made my bicep bigger, okay? The first thing you need to do, okay, is, and personally, I would first draft my sleeve with this added centimeter, okay? Measure across your bicep, which is roughly where the front pitch is, on both sleeves. So draft both sleeves, measure across, and double check that, cross check that to your bicep measurements, okay? So of course, we haven't finished drafting, but I'm just going to show you what that would look like. Take away seam allowances, because this entire draft includes seam allowances. So I'd measure, and I'm going to do it in centimeters, from here to here. I'm going to go across the chest, the chest line, the balance line of the sleeve, okay? I'm going to measure here to here, 21. 21 I'm going to bring back here because they share the same hind arm seam. And I'm going to come over and I'm going to measure 38. 38 centimeters is my finished bicep, okay? What I would do is I would flex my bicep, okay? Go around, of course, I've got like non-existent biceps, but go around, what did I say it was? 21, 38. You want to compare that 38, obviously, to your bicep, your flexed bicep. And you want at least 2 inches, I think, more, okay, of ease, which means on the half, 1 inch of ease, okay? But you probably want about 2 inches of ease more, just for it to sit well on your, over your biceps, okay?
Daphne, you had a question?
Is there?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think like, so my measurement came out to like 14 and a half inches or so with ease included. And my bicep measurement is 15 inches,
Okay.
which seems really far off.
Half. Sorry, you measured your sleeve to 14 and a half?
Yeah.
And your bicep is 15. So you really want it to be 17. Okay.
Right. And that's with seam allowances,
With seam allowance.
which seems really off, right?
Not including seam allowance. So this is
Including seam
14 and a half is the true measurement.
No.
It's including.
Wait,
seam allowance.
so can you show the measurement points like one more time?
Yeah. So I have a 1 centimeter seam on the back. Okay. So I'm going to start measuring 1 centimeter in from the back. And I have 1 centimeter on the front as well, on the forearm seam. So I'm going to measure from there to the actual stitch line. I'm gonna take that amount and bring it back to the stitch line of the hind arm seam. And now you need to come in, because we haven't made the underarm, the under sleeve yet. I just need you to measure to 1 centimeter before this mark that we've made. Okay, so if I were to do it on this one, I would measure from 1 centimeter in. I'm getting 22 to here. 21 is where the stitch line is. And drag 21 back here. Again, stitch line, not edge of the paper. And I'm gonna come in 1 centimeter before I reach that notch, which is 38. Okay, so when you do that, what do you get?
I get 12 1/4.
You get 12 1/4. My first question is your armhole big enough? That's my very first question is your armhole big enough? The armhole on your jacket. The main thing, so there's a couple things. I'm gonna just go a bit on a tangent because this is a question that was asked even before we did this workshop. It's a big question because sleeves obviously need to fit biceps. That is not even a question. Okay. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people don't fit into off the rack jackets sometimes is merely because the sleeve is just too small. Okay. So when you have your armhole, you have the width of your armhole and you have the height of your armhole. Okay. Obviously, you have to have a balance between the two. Okay. But you really need to have, if you have a bigger bicep, you really need to have a good width of your armhole. Okay. If you've toiled your jacket and you've already checked the width of your armhole, my guess is that it's probably not wide enough, which means you're going to want to add either under your arm, or at the back point. You might want to make this panel a little bit bigger. Okay. Or if you need more across the chest, you're going to push this seam a little bit further back on your body by adding to the underarm seam. Or you can also add to the top. Okay, all of those things will make your armhole bigger in one way or another. Okay. What happens when you add to the top is you're also making the crown height taller. Okay, which is a very specific thing to do because it drops the armhole point, right? So if you've made the jacket, if you've toiled the jacket and it doesn't feel like it's tight up in your armpit, okay, then your crown height is good, okay? But if it feels like it's restricting your armpit, then you definitely need to drop it. And you're automatically gonna have a bigger armhole and you're automatically gonna have a bigger sleeve, okay? If your crown height is good though, you're gonna wanna double check the width of your armhole on your jacket, okay? Because it might be too small. And the thing is, in standard patterns, they don't think about this. When they size up, they don't necessarily think of the armhole, they just think of the cloth that needs to cover the human body. So sometimes it's something that you might have to go back and take a look at, okay?
Okay, then sorry, even if I make the armhole, bigger, it seems like I'm not gonna get 5 inches out of that. Right, even if I take like an extra 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch, like, 4, I guess I'm missing like 4 1/4. That seems like a lot.
I mean, have you toiled this jacket
Yeah,
and the armhole feels like it fits well?
I think so. I'm still working on it, but
Okay.
I wonder if when you measured the bicep construction line, did you connect the right points? Because that, I've done that before, and then you might have gotten a
I
small.
also have not, sometimes I do not do this calculation correctly. And sometimes I used to always get very narrow sleeves. And I was like, I don't understand why my sleeves are always so narrow. And it was just, I wasn't quite doing the math correctly. You can try by not subtracting this 1.5 centimeters. Okay, that's the first thing you can do. The thing with sleeves is that you can get surprisingly a lot more width in certain areas by changing something by a very small amount. Okay, so that's part of like why they can drive us crazy, is because you're like you're saying, it seems like a large amount to change, right? If you think about it. So right now, give me your measurements again. You've got, you're measuring 12 and a half.
12 3/4.
There's no way that 38. Okay, so mine is 15. So
I remember your circumference was bigger than mine by like an inch or so.
okay, my finished armhole of my jacket is bigger.
Yeah. So maybe I do need to make the armhole bigger.
I feel like you want to make the armhole bigger. You're making a jacket, or are you making a shirt?
A jacket.
Okay, yeah. So you're gonna want to make the armhole a little bit bigger. I can't tell you exactly how or where without seeing the actual jacket. If you want, you can totally send me photos of you wearing the jacket. I have no problem, and I'll tell you exactly where I feel like it could be bigger. Oftentimes, I have to say, oftentimes, the side body is just too small. Okay, when your side body is too small, the armhole is going to be too small. Okay, there's only so far that the front pattern can wrap around the body. So you cannot keep adding to the front pattern. The front pattern has a stopping point. Okay, sometimes I see standard patterns and they like wrap like way around to here. And that is, I mean, for shirts where you've got a front and a back, okay, sure. But for a jacket that needs to be more fitted, there's only so far that this point can go. And that point actually is a very specific point. It's right here. Okay, it's not here. That would be too far back. It's right here. Okay, so it's a little bit forward of, you know, of where like my shirt seam is. This is where my shirt seam is, right? That's like a 2-piece. You've got a front and a back. My shirt seam is right here. So actually about 1 inch in front is where my jacket seam should stop, okay? Because then you have your side panel, okay? And your side panel, imagine, is this plane of your body, okay? If you have 2, it's split in 2. If you have 1, it's 1 panel like so, okay? And what I really want is that panel to come all the way to where you see the end, where you guys see on the camera is the end of my back, okay? because then that's another plane. This is the plane of my back, and this is the plane of my body, and they're gonna meet right there, okay? On the front, it's a little bit different. Sometimes you can have the same idea, and sometimes they're gonna meet right here, and you're gonna have a dart, right, that shapes the front, okay? Or you'll have a princess seam panel, and then your side body. Okay, either way, your side seam is coming from this point right here, and it's coming a little bit forward and down the front of your body. Okay, so you can see that my side panel is there. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense for checking it. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to take away a centimeter here because there's a centimeter seam allowance, okay? But do you roughly see where that side panel is? And now do you understand why really this side panel is the key to how big my bicep's gonna be, right? Like this is the key piece, which is annoying because you wouldn't think that, right? You would think that the bicep has to do with, I don't know.
I've been like fussing with this.
Right.
And I'm like, this
circumference
can't,
of the armhole. It could have to do with anything, but really this is the key, because if this piece is like even an inch smaller, that means my armhole is going to be an inch too narrow. And that's not necessarily something that you notice in a fitting. Okay. Because maybe you're compensating for the width by having a really tall armhole, okay? Because obviously that armhole turns into a circle, right? So, and it's manipulatable. So you might be compensating for not having enough width by having a little bit more height, and that's going to give you a narrower armhole, okay? Sorry, a narrower sleeve. It's going to give you a narrower sleeve, even if technically the circumference works, okay? So I would say the first thing you want to do is double check the body of your jacket. Okay, that's the first thing you want to do. The second thing you want to do is just double check your math, because that's where I was going wrong every time. I also was measuring from B to this line, to the chest line, not to the front pitch. So just double check that. For the longest time, I was like, I cannot understand why all my sleeves are so narrow. You have to measure from the back pitch to the front pitch. And I was measuring from the back pitch to this line, okay? Which is gonna make this whole thing more than a centimeter smaller, which on the double is like an inch smaller, okay? So it's crazy that can happen, but if you bring this down to here, then we're really talking about a half an inch narrower, okay? The other thing you can do is, if you've checked all those things and you're only off by, let's say, an inch, okay? Add a half an inch here, okay? And measure from, you can measure on the actual line to the top, which for me is right here. And then you're going to want to pull that outwards and bring it to the new line, okay? So I have to raise the back pitch by about a centimeter, okay? In order for those two to be the same length, okay? Which means that my sleeve cap is not going to be a different size, which is very important. You're going to bring this up to here. Okay. Does that make sense? So that's going to make your bicep wider. Okay. But please keep in touch with me, because this is also something that I think that tailors in general are not the most knowledgeable about. I mean, honestly, patterners in general are not super knowledgeable about. So I feel like I would love to have sort of a very, like, this is a very clear alteration, right? A modification to the sleeve where you add width to the bicep and you make sure that that's the same length, right? That's a very specific modification to do. But if you're off by inches, right, this is not going to be enough. Okay. So there are these little techniques to add a little bit to the bicep with this sleeve drafting method. But again, it's not going to give you inches. Okay. So keep in touch with me. I'm curious to work with you on making a sleeve that works. Okay. Because I know that this is a thing. Okay, let's finish drafting the under sleeve, you guys. So we've almost completed the top sleeve, okay? There are two things that we need to do to complete the upper sleeve, okay? One of them is we need to permanently create our hem, okay? What you want to do with the hem, and again, annoying because it's not an exact science, and I know, is that you want to get sort of an average between this slant and this slant, okay? If you can also get a right angle here, that's fantastic. Because if you have a button cuff, you really want that angle to be a right angle. Remember, you always have to go through that original notch that set the sleeve length, okay? You always have to go through that. So really, I'm pretty close. I'm having to come up a little bit here. I'm basically correct down here, okay? This sleeve length, once you toile, once you fit your jacket, you're going to have to change it anyways. Okay. It's going to be give or take a centimeter. Okay. Because there's no way. Sleeve lengths are very particular. So again, this is a good starting point for our sleeve draft. That's the first thing you need to do. The second thing we need to do is this little area right here, okay, which we have not connected yet. This is the last piece that's missing from our sleeve run, okay? You are now going to need your front pattern, okay? You need your front pattern. You need your front pitch. You need, this is the front side of your sleeve. It's going to connect to the front side of your jacket, okay? So you need to turn your jacket over if it's not in the correct direction, okay? And you need to mark your front pitch over to this side of the jacket. And you need to put your front pitch on top of your front pitch line. The other thing you can do is put your chest line over your chest line. Chest line over the chest line or balance line of your sleeve. Do you guys see how these lines are on top of each other? Yes, my chest line is lined up there. My chest line of my jacket is lined up with the chest line of my sleeve. They are on top of each other. And my front pitch is at my front pitch. Okay. You're going to draw this curve right here. You're gonna transfer over that curve, and then what you're gonna do is you need to come in, you need to mark on the jacket pattern where your forearm seam is going to hit on the jacket, which is a centimeter in from this line. Okay, the seam, remember the seam is right here. I'm gonna draw my seams in a color because this little area is a little bit complicated. You're probably gonna have to come back to this video, okay, because this is complicated. I had to learn it a couple times. Everyone who was in my training had to relearn it a couple times because the first time you hear it, it doesn't make 100% sense, okay? So what did we do? We lined up our chest line, on top of each other, and then slide so that your front pitch edge of your pattern is matching up with the front pitch point on your sleeve draft. You are going to mark that curve coming from the front pitch and going down. And then on the jacket, you're going to mark where the forearm seam is going to be, and you're going to fold it. Okay, you're going to fold it right there.
And that is now a notch on your body pattern
Exactly.
for when you connect the sleeve to the body.
It's a theoretical notch, yes, because we're also easing in, so, you know, give or take 5 millimeters, but it's, yes, it's a theoretical notch, okay? You folded this knot, this point, okay? So now we have to flip it over. And that point now, I'm gonna mark it in green, that notch needs to be connected to a centimeter in from that point, right? That point is the edge of our pattern for the underarm sleeve, okay? Connect that, place that. You have to, again, line up your chest lines and make sure that these notches are sitting on top of each other. There we go. Make sure that, remember that our jacket pattern now has a seam right here. Mine is a centimeter. Yours might be 5/8 of an inch. That is where, that is the base of the armhole on the sleeve. So we're going to draw this curve. And that is the base of the armhole. Remember, it's not the edge of the paper pattern. It's where the stitch line is. Okay. I'm going to make this line nice and clear. This is the base of my armhole. We've got this coming up now. We've got, this in green is still going to be my stitch line. Come down here, right? We cut that off. We don't need that. Come down here. It's the same amount. These match. You guys see that these match?
That is your seam allowance
This is
for
our
the
seam
sleeve.
right here. This is seam allowance.
You can draw that centimeter line all the way down.
Yes.
The seam, that's the seam allowance, and the line would be the seam line.
Now, we don't need this anymore. If you had a princess seam, you're probably going to be doing this with your front side body. Okay, because your front pitch is probably on your front side body. Okay. The next part is taking your side body, and we need to just continue this again from a centimeter in, or whatever your seam allowance is. Line that up with the base of your armhole. Line up your chest line. Roughly draw this curve for as far as it will go. Okay. Done. Now, we need to connect to the back. How do we connect to the back? Again, seam allowances. I'm going to use this original line because I know we've got a couple here. This one right here. Okay. Come in by a centimeter. Once you really understand this drafting method, you don't need to do all these seam allowance lines anymore. But they're really helpful when you are trying to understand this part right here, okay? From this point, this is our seam allowance, this is our back pitch, okay? You're going to come out another seam from here, roughly. Roughly a centimeter, okay? But you've got a centimeter to go around the armhole and a centimeter to go down the hind arm, okay? So you've got two seam allowances at that point. And you need to connect these two now, okay? Connect them in a curve. The key is that this curve needs to be exactly the same for as long as you can possibly make it, okay? These two are pretty close to connecting, okay? I can literally just connect them like this. And they look pretty good, okay? So I'm lucky, but you might not have the same situation. You might have to scoop a little bit further out. For example, if I were to use this wider, the wider bicep, okay? And of course, my bicep is now up here. My the B changed, the other B. Okay, there's my seam allowance. It's further out, okay? So now when I connect this, I'm gonna keep this curve for as long as I possibly can, and then I'm going to connect it to here. You guys see that? So I'm going to show you this. That's for the smaller bicep. Pink again. This is for the larger bicep. Okay. Now I want to just bring one thing to your attention. I feel like we're probably starting to go over time right now. Okay. And there's a couple things I still need to add. This is fairly straight. Do you notice how straight that is? I am not giving a horseshoe shape like that. Okay. All of this is called drape. And there's drape in the sleeve and there's drape in the jacket. And if you guys are in our sleeve, our fitting workshop, I've already talked about drape. You see also here that there's a bit of, it's fairly straight here. I'm not scooping like this, okay? This is one of like the biggest, it's not really an issue necessarily, but one of the biggest things that I see in standard patterns is that they really scoop the back, okay? The back does not need to be scooped. If you see, can you spotlight my body, my camera? If you see my body, here we've got to scoop. We have to scoop, especially on women's wear, okay? You have to scoop around here. This is where you turn, you do a U-turn right here, okay? Look at how straight the backside is. Don't look at my sleeve, the edge of my shirt, because the edge of my shirt is coming all the way in here. But if you think about where a jacket sleeve needs to be, it needs to be right here. Okay. So really it needs to come, because that's where my arm creases. Okay. And that's where you want that seam to be. You want that seam to come right in that crease, the same way that you want the sleeve to come right in this crease. Okay. So if my sleeve were to come right into this crease, look at how flat that is. Completely flat. Okay. From this point coming straight up to my shoulder point. Okay. So there's barely any curve on the back side of the armhole. Okay. It's very minimal. That being said, this concept of drape is basically, sometimes in order to hug someone, I want to give my client a little extra cloth. Okay. Sometimes you want it in the sleeve, sometimes you want it in the jacket. But the moment I set my arm back down, that's going to look like folds right here. Okay. So different tailors have different ways of thinking about drape. They feel differently about it. I'm personally someone who wants to have as little drape as possible because I want the jacket to look very clean on the back, but I also want people to be able to obviously have ease of movement, ease of motion. Okay, so I don't want you to feel restricted, but I want it to be as clean as possible. Okay, so that is something that you can play around with after you've already done a toile. Okay, you want to make sure that it's not too tight. Once you know it's not too tight, then you can start taking some away. Okay, and cleaning up your drape. Okay, taking away extra drape. Okay, but you want to make sure it's not too tight first. So make it as straight as you possibly can first. And then if you look at your toile, you're in your fitting, you look at your toile, there's too much cloth. Let me go back to my pattern and trim away 1/4 of an inch at a time. Okay, trim away 1/4 of an inch. Does that work better? Trim away another 1/4 of an inch. Also in your fitting, you'll be able to see if there's too much drape on the jacket or if there's too much drape on the sleeve. Okay, it will be obvious because there will be extra fabric, obviously, either on the sleeve or on the jacket. Okay, so notice that this is very straight at the beginning. If you need to put a little bit more curve into it, take away some of the drape, you can do that, but be very careful. It's better to have it be straight from the get-go. Okay, so this is your sleeve done. except for the only thing, so you'll notice that they are sharing a hind arm seam. Both the top and the under sleeve have exactly the same hind arm seam. It's the same shape, it's the same length. It's beautiful because if you're cutting a plaid jacket, your plaids are gonna mirror away from this seam exactly in the same way if you cut it correctly, okay? That's the beauty of having a shared hind arm seam. Your forearm seam is also basically done. The only difference is that you have to sort of give it a bit of a curve, which again is, we're talking 1/8 of an inch. It's basically the same thing. Just make sure that your curve is concentrated at your elbow, okay? It should not be curved. And this comes straight down, okay? You don't want your curves to be happening right here. Sorry, that was a little exaggerated. You don't want your curves to happen here. Okay, that's an exaggeration. Okay, you want this to be straight, this to be straight, and the curve to be right here, okay? Once you reach this stage, you're going to want to transfer your under sleeve to a different piece of paper so that you can cut them out separately. Okay, use a tracing wheel. I actually cut out the entire upper sleeve, and then you only really need to trace out this line and this line because the rest are all shared. Okay. And then, and I also, to be honest, I will show you this. You also don't really have to trace this because you can use the edge of your upper sleeve to draw your forearm seam of your under sleeve because you want them to match. You want the shape to match. Okay. Even if one is a little bit longer than the other, you want the shape to match. Okay. The other thing you want to do is you need notches. One of the notches is the chest line, for lack of a better term. Chest line is a notch, okay? That's so that you can put the hind arm seam together correctly. You have notches on the forearm seam as well. Remember, you have to stretch the upper sleeve forearm seam, okay? And the way that I do that is my notches are, and I'm going to show you on this, 4 inches in from each side. 4 inches, I put a notch. 4 inches, I put a notch. I'm going to stretch between those 4 inches. I'm going to measure 4 inches in on this side and 4 inches in on this side. Okay, which means that the difference in length is between the 4 inches. That's where you have to stretch. Okay, so these are another 2 notches. If you have a button cuff, if you're making a 4-button cuff, you're going to want 4 inches up, and that's where your vent opening is going to start. If you have 5 buttons, you're going to want 5 inches. And other than that, when you're putting your sleeve in to the armhole, okay, what you do I'm going to show you this like this. What you're going to do is you're going to have your your jacket is gonna be made with your armhole made like this, okay? Everything's going to be connected like so. Okay. This. This is also going to be, wait, not on screen. This is also going to be closed, obviously. And the way that I do this is I do it on a sleeve board so that the shoulder wraps around the top of the sleeve board, okay? And you're gonna take your sleeve, which is made and you're gonna lay it right here. Okay, it's gonna be made. You're gonna lay it right here. And notice that it really is in line. It's not swinging forward. It's not swinging back. It's you're trying to eyeball the pitch as correctly as possible, straight down, okay? I'm gonna show you just the underarm. You're gonna basically lift up the sleeve cap, okay? And you're gonna make sure that everything underneath is in line. You're gonna start from your front pitch and you're gonna baste from your front pitch all the way around the base of the armhole. You are going to bring this on because that's where the sleeve curves, okay? You're going to make sure that this is matching the back pitch. This point is matching the back pitch. Yes. Back pitches should be connected. Remember, the back pitch is a notch on the jacket. It is where the seam, the hind arm seam is on the sleeve, okay? That is all flat. Basted flat. There's no ease in the sleeve. There's no ease in the jacket. You are basting flat from the front pitch all the way around, bringing the sleeve onto the jacket to the back pitch is flat, okay? Now, what I do at that point is I stop right there, I tack, and then I start from the front pitch and I come up, okay? And I come up to roughly the same height of where my back pitch is on the front, okay? Flat. From the front pitch up, flat. No ease in either side. From here to here is where you ease in your sleeve cap, okay? So that's very important. I think that some people think that at the base of the armhole, there's some sort of easing in situation. There should not be any easing in. There is no easing in under the armhole. They need to be made perfectly to fit perfectly into each other like puzzle pieces, okay? Because that's what's really going to make this sleeve hang straight down, okay? Yes, Bella, is there anything you want to add or clarify?
Yes. Okay, so we have finished drafting our sleeve. I just want to make everyone aware that even if your pattern has 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we have drafted your sleeve
Yes,
to have 1 centimeter seam allowance.
yes,
That means you're going to sew your whole thing. You're going to sew the body of whatever you're sewing with the 5/8 of an inch seam allowance like it has. But when you sew your sleeves, you're going to sew it with 1 centimeter seam allowance because that is what we have drafted it with.
yes.
Also, we have drafted the sleeve without hem allowance. This is the length of your sleeve without seam allowance at the hem.
Yeah.
So when you go to make your sleeves or when you go to cut out your sleeves, you're going to want to add 2 inches.
You also need to add for a button cuff.
Yeah.
If you have a button cuff.
Right.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Those are very, very important points. Okay. Are there any questions? I'm sorry we ran a little bit over. Are there any questions? This is recorded. So you can go back and rewatch it. Daphne, be in touch with me, please, about this bicep situation. I want to make sure that you get a sleeve that fits you. Okay, so obviously, every method is a method that is not foolproof. It doesn't work for every body. And there always need to be rules that are created for different body types. I was not taught all those rules in my training. I am coming up with rules as I gain more and more experience. There's rules that I have created about body posture, about body types. And so this is another thing that I would love to sort of get some rules around. Yeah. So keep in touch with me about that. And yeah, the last thing that I would say is, if it hasn't been stressed enough in these last couple hours, a sleeve is only as perfect as its armhole. Okay, there's a reason why that we draft a sleeve from the armhole. We don't draft it for any generic jacket. It also means that every time you change your armhole, you're going to have to redraft your sleeve. Okay, because if you think of all the, oh, there's one more thing I wanted to say. If you think of all the things that can change just from adding a centimeter to the circumference of your armhole, okay? It can change the crown height, it can change the pitch location, it can change the width of the bicep. It changes so many things, too many things to keep track of. It's sort of just easier once you get this drafting down to just redraft, okay? There's one more thing that I forgot to mention that I want to mention, which is a check. This check is my sleeve run going to fit in my armhole? Okay. And this check also basically tells you, did I draft correctly? Okay. Because the drafting should, if you drafted correctly, you should get the correct amount of ease in your sleeve cap. Okay. And that amount is 11%. 11%. Don't forget the magical number. I'm going to show you right now how to use it. The magical number is that the sleeve run needs to be 11% bigger than the finished armhole measurement. Okay. So I'm now going to measure this sleeve. Again, from seam to seam on the stitch line.
That means without any seam allowance,
No seam allowance.
anywhere.
Luckily, we've already marked all our seam allowances on here, so this should be pretty easy. $58. And something. My finished was 48. That sounds a little big. Finished was 48. 48. 48.5 times 0.11. That's how you do 11%. 48 times 0.11. That's the extra you need, plus 48.5. So I should get 54 approximately. And I'm a little bit on the big side right now. So I'm just gonna double check this again. Okay, so I am passing 40. Oh no, I need to be at 50. Okay, so I'm still at 57.5. So this is still a little bit big. So what happens is if it's a little bit big, you need to come in a little bit here. Okay. Not by very much. Also, you can ease in a little bit this area right here. But if I'm getting 50, I was getting 57 and it needs to be 54. I'm about 3 centimeters a little bit too big. I would bring this in a little bit. Okay, again, you have to be very careful here because also I did bring this out a little bit too much. You guys remember, I decided to bring this out a little bit too much. Literally shaving off 1/8 of an inch actually sometimes does the trick. Do not shave off the top, but these might be a little bit. Okay, let me try this again. This one I know is. Two and a half. Okay, so I took away a centimeter. I'm at 57. So I took away a centimeter just by trimming off 1/8 of an inch around the top, around this and this. Okay, so just so you guys know. I can also trim off a little bit here. So basically displacing the seam a little bit further. I don't want to mess this up now, but you will basically be coming in and coming in, okay? Which means you have to redraw this here, okay? Your new here. Here. Okay, let's see if that worked. Me too. We are at 56. So I shaved off another centimeter. 54, 56. It could work, give or take a couple. If you have more, that's okay. Okay. Depending on your cloth. If your cloth shrinks easily, you're going to be fine. If your cloth does not shrink easily, you're going to need to take a little bit more out. Okay. Again, when it comes to a big bicep, we need to be very careful with this because we still want the sleeve to fit. Okay. Into the armhole. So it's a balance of making the armhole just the perfect size, not too small for the right bicep. Okay. Obviously not too big, but it needs to be big enough that the bicep is gonna fit the person. Okay. So this is pretty good. You guys noticed how I made this underarm, the undersleeve a little bit narrower. Okay. Better to make the under sleeve narrower than the top sleeve. The top sleeve, you don't want it to be narrower. Okay. The top sleeve needs to wrap around the arm. Okay. Also, just to give you guys an idea, some people draft the under sleeve significantly smaller. There's different drafting methods. Some of them are much more narrow. So actually, if you lower the back pitch, this has a lower back pitch. If you lower your back pitch, your sleeve will also be a little bit smaller. So here my crown height is significantly off from the sleeve that I had drafted previously. So I need to double check. It's possible that in my haste, I wrote down the wrong crown height. Maybe I measured it. You know what I might have done? I think I might have measured my crown height from my front pitch line. Okay, instead of from my chest line. I can tell you right now because that would explain why it's too big. Crown height is 20. No, 20 is from, crown height is 20. Wait a second. I'm sorry, I forgot to take away a certain amount from the crown height. Again, all of these. Crown height minus an inch. Yep, that's where we went wrong. I'm sorry. So your crown height is minus 2.5 centimeters. It's the front. Remember when we did the crown height? When we measured from the shoulder seam down, on the front. Just want to make sure you guys can see this. The shoulder seam down from the front to the chest line and on the back and on the front. And we found the average. You need to take away an inch from that amount. Okay. So I'm going to write that down right here. The crown height. Crown height is the, how do you put this? It's the average sleeve cap height from chest line minus 1 inch. Okay. Which means that my crown height should actually be 17 and a half, which is exactly what I had written down on my pattern. 7 centimeters. Okay. So yes, this is supposed to be shorter, which of course is going to make the armhole fit. Okay. The construction is still exactly the same. It's exactly the same. The construction does not change. The crown height that I used for that specific sleeve was too big. So this sleeve will not fit that jacket. Okay. So, is that clear to everyone? Is the method clear to everyone? Is this adjustment clear to everyone? When you calculate your crown height, you have to take away an inch. Okay.
This is a great example of calculating wrong, doing the check,
Exactly.
and seeing I
Exactly.
drafted it wrong.
Exactly. This is exactly why we have all these checks. Okay. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Are there any other questions? Okay.
So if we adjust the crown height, does that also move the back pitch? Because when I'm looking at mine, I feel like if I move the crown height down an inch, it would be way too close to the back pitch line.
If it's too close to your back pitch line, it means that you need to move your back pitch line down on your jacket as well. You can move your back pitch line wherever you want it to be. But if you move it on your jacket, on your sleeve, you need to move it on your jacket. Okay.
Thank you.
So yes, you can totally place your back pitch. In fact, remember when I widened, when I added to the bicep width of the jacket, I also raised the back pitch. The moment I raise it on the sleeve, I need to raise it on the jacket as well by exactly the same amount. Okay. So yes, you can definitely move that back pitch. If you guys can imagine 2.5 centimeters below, I can just really quickly show you guys what this would actually look like. There we go. Okay, that is what my sleeve is going to look like. Okay. You can measure. Nothing else has changed. That's the easiest thing to change is the crown height. 22.5. $54. Okay. 54 is exactly what it needed to be. So it's 11% bigger now. Okay. Does that make sense? So, lesson of the evening, check and double check. Okay. And use your checks and balances. Use these checks. They're there on purpose because no matter how many times I have drafted this so many times and I still forgot to take away that 1 inch. Okay. So I also have a list of all these formulas, because it's take away 2.5 centimeters, take away 1.5 centimeters, take away, it's too many to keep track of. Okay. So I have my list of formulas. And I think that those are, we sent them written instructions, right?
Mhm. In the pre-recorded video, that 1 inch
All
is
in there
taken
as well.
away
Of course,
and it
yes.
all works.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So in your written instructions, all the formulas are written down. In the pre-recorded video, all the formulas are on the screen. So I would make a little cheat sheet just to keep track of everything. Okay. Okay, you guys. Send us photos of your finished sleeves. We want to see how they turn out. And definitely be in touch with us if you have any questions, if you're having any problems with any of your sleeves, setting them in. If you need some tips, get in touch with us. Okay, that's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. If you
Thank
have
you
any
so
questions
much.
you want to ask us right now, you can stay a little later. We've
Mhm.
already gone overtime, so if you need to leave, leave. And
Thank you so much.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.